Welcome to a new year of A Walk in the Garden on NCTV. I'm Liz Davey, and we're here in my garden in Norfolk, and our plan is to present shows every month or twice a month as the season wears on, as we go through my gardens and see what's happening, what's blooming, and what chores need to be done. Then we'll go inside and do a little cooking and maybe a little crafting with some of the things from the garden. Right now, our garden is pretty pitiful looking because there is nothing much here. Some of the herbs like sage could still be picked. You could probably get a little bit if you really needed it, but it's covered with oak leaves and everything's kind of sleeping under there. In another month, we'll see things start to really pop up. We're having some warm days now. Today particularly is going to be in the 60s, which is very unusual for early February. So don't expect it to last, because it won't. Colder weather is on the way. Hopefully none of it too far below zero. However, we'll leave all the mulches on the plants at this point. If you really want to do something in the garden, you can start on nice days doing some pruning. Any dead limbs can come down, and also evergreens can be pruned at this time. Boxwood, holly, and your evergreen bushes can be pruned. Don't prune anything with spring blooms. They shouldn't have been pruned in the fall, and they shouldn't be pruned until after they bloom, or you won't have any blooms. It's pretty simple. If you prune off the buds, no bloom. So leave those and then prune them after they've bloomed so you can enjoy them in their full glory. We're just going to walk around the perennial garden a little bit. Again, we can pick up sticks and pine cones. That's a job that can be done almost any day, cold or warm. And we will be doing some burning later on of the branches that will pick up in the yard. We had quite a bit of wind in December, and we had a lot of branches come down. Just little things for the most part, but enough that we need to pick up. Keep picking them up. There are a few big ones back here. The straw is still on some of the plants, and my baskets are also still on the more tender perennials. The butterfly weed pods are still showing up in the garden, but many of the plants have been knocked down and are ready to be cleaned up. That will come a little later. One thing you can do if we have a nice day is be sure to clean out any bird houses if you didn't do it in the fall. I did mine in the fall, but the birds will be coming back, and the bluebirds are early. In fact, I've seen the bluebirds around even now. Some of them I think stay all winter. So the bluebirds nest very early. So if you have bluebird houses, make sure that they're ready for the bluebirds at least by the 1st of March. Again, I have baskets on the perennials, and I could start trimming down the red twig dogwood. I'll be cutting that one all the way back this spring, and it will form new red shoots for fall. Let's move down to the vegetable garden area and see what's going on there. It's good to walk around your garden every couple days if you possibly can get out, if it's not too snow covered, and just see what's going on. Make sure that the deer aren't eating up some of your plants, and if they are, why, be sure to spray them because they will come back and finish them off. And just see what's happening and kind of make a list of what things you'd like to add, what you'd like to do differently next spring, and then keep watching the list as the season wears on. I'm down in the vegetable garden, and our straw has held up very well on the strawberries, the garlic we planted in October, and also the parsley, which I hope will come up again for an early spring crop. Parsley is a biennial, so biennials do come up the second season, as long as you don't pull them out or mow them under in the fall. Lovage will also come up, and I mark that so that we won't step on it or hurt it. Brush piles are in several spots around my yard. Burning in Norfolk starts very soon if it hasn't already started. It is by permit only, and it only lasts until the end of April. So if you have brush to burn, be sure to get your permit and make plans for when you'd like to burn it. Again, and they will not allow burning if the wind is too high, so you do need to call each day to make sure that the burning is permitted. I won't be doing much in the garden except burning the brush, and then later on we will do some cultivating of the garden to get it ready for planting. I'm going to go over here and pick some forsythia. That is starting to bud, and I'm going to try to do some creative pruning as I pick the shoots. It likes to bloom on new wood, and I'm just going to pick a few shoots of it and bring them in and put them in water. I'm going to try to pick the wayward shoots here. And we should have some forsythia blooms in maybe a week. The other thing I notice, even though it doesn't seem like spring and it is still winter, we're about halfway to spring between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. But up here, I'm noting that I have a few pussy willows. And so I think I'll pick a shoot of those too. They're not all out yet, but they will be coming. They're one of the first things in the garden. Those and the early crocuses. But I'm very surprised that the pussy willows are even starting now, so we can add that in with the forsythia, and perhaps a few more will come out. Now let's move around to the back. Again, I've covered my work area with plastic, and we have mostly storage back in this area, getting ready for spring. My pots of winter greens are still here, and though I might like to clean them up, there's no way I'm going to do that right now. Even though the couple days have been warm, they're still frozen in tight. So we will not be cleaning up this pot or any of the others until things thaw a lot more than they are now. This is another shrub you can pick to bring inside. This is a witch hazel, and it blooms extremely early, actually very late winter. And I'm going to pick some of that to add to my little seasonal bouquet here. And it also helps to prune the plant. But you can see it has these little orange blooms on it, which can be very effective with the forsythia and the pussy willows. Looking up in the trees, you can see all kinds of nests. We have a couple squirrel nests. I know we have squirrels. They've been raiding the bird feeder regularly. And I can look around and see broken limbs and also bird nests and squirrel nests. So it's kind of fun to look around a little differently. Usually we keep our eyes down and see just the plants that are closer to the ground. We have lots of birds, and they too are in the trees, also at the feeders, and today they're making quite a bit of noise now that it's a little warmer. We're not going back to the pond today because with the thaw of the very top layer of the ground, it's very muddy out there. But I do go out and check on the garden shed and also the pond. I have an ice melter in there that keeps a little hole in the ice for the fish, and so that any gases that form under the ice can escape. I keep feeding the birds over here. And they've been really chowing down. I did take the opportunity yesterday to go through and clean up some of the seed that had fallen, the seed hulls. I don't have too much trouble with seeds growing, mainly because the birds eat the seed that's inside and leave only the hulls. So those are the only thing that need to be cleaned up periodically. I did put some evergreens over this area. I have spring bulbs planted here, and if I look under the evergreens, I can see that they're starting to peep through. Some crocuses, some daffodils, and some tulips. I want to keep those frozen a little longer because we're liable to have some very cold weather. And with that cold weather, I don't want them to grow and bloom too soon. But because this is near a lot of windows, this will be the area that blooms first in my garden. It gets a lot of sun, and with all the glass, and also the bricks that hold the heat, it is probably the warmest area in the whole garden. Now let's go inside and do a little cooking, make some decorations for Valentine's, and get these cuttings into water. We're inside now, and a lot of gardening is going on in here with houseplants. These are the cuttings that we took in the fall, and they have continued to grow, and I'm continuing to water them, and I'm starting to add a little fertilizer. One of the things they say is weekly, which means water them weekly, as you need to water them for the water, and add a little fertilizer. So a week fertilizer solution. And that's what I'm trying to do with these. I want them to grow, but I don't want them to grow too fast because it's a good 2 months before any of these can go out in the garden. This is geranium, scented geranium, peppermint, I believe, yes, it sounds, and this is coleus. And you can see where we pinched it a month ago, we have new shoots. So we can go ahead and pinch those growing tips out again, and it will split again. And this is how you make the plants a little bushier. And I'll continue doing that even when it moves outside. I put the forsythia, the pussy willows, and the witch hazel into water. Many of the witch hazels that bloom a little later in the spring are brighter colors. Some of them are bright orange or are bright yellow, and you'll think they were forsythia, and you'd wonder why the forsythia was blooming so early. But witch hazel does bloom extremely early. Last fall, we dug the amaryllis bulbs that I had put out into the garden for the summer, for their little summer vacation. And I'm pleased to say that all 5 of the bulbs now have buds. So we will have lovely red amaryllis blooms, possibly in time for Valentine's Day. We're still early in the month, and we have another week or so to go before Valentine's Day. So we may have some lovely red flowers for Valentine's Day. Again, I have 3 in another container and 2 in this one. I've added some moss around the pots just to kind of dress them up. It serves no real purpose other than just to kind of cover up the pots. And I use 2 different pots in this, so it makes it look like they might be the same underneath. Now let's move over to my work table. We're going to make some centerpieces that kind of celebrate Valentine's Day. And I did get some forest flowers. This is Alstroemeria, and it is a more tropical plant, although they do have varieties that will grow in our climate. Most of it is imported because it likes warmer conditions. There are just a few varieties that can survive here. And I'm going to use my clippers. I've filled my little pot here with some of the floral foam, and it's been soaked. And since this is going on the dining room table, I really don't want too tall an arrangement. So we'll just push these right in. And then I have some baby's breath as filler. I could also go out in the yard and pick a little Pachysandra or some of the other ground covers, myrtle, some of the Leucothwae, which is a shrub that is evergreen, or even a few evergreens. But I kind of like the looks of the baby's breath. I'm trying to make a little more romantic looking arrangement that will last a little bit. I'll put one in the middle. Any leaves that would be into the foam I will remove. Oh, that's fairly full. And again, I can continue filling in with the sprigs of baby's breath around the edge and even in the middle. Then to really jazz it up for Valentine's Day, I got these little hearts at the craft store that I'll stick in. Actually, these were from the dollar store and just $1 each, so not a great expense for Valentine decorations. And there we have a little decoration for Valentine's Day. And I have enough of the flowers left over to actually put some in the vase, so I'll have something in the kitchen as well. And this one I'll just put in water. Again, making sure that the water does not cover the leaves. This is a little smaller grouping. And again, maybe I'll put one of the hearts in the middle. And finish out with the sprigs of baby's breath. If you wished, you could put foam in this, or actually the glass marbles if you needed to hold it together a little more. And this one needs to be shortened just a little bit. And this does not stick out enough, so we'll just leave that one at pink and white and add my other heart into this arrangement. So we have several Valentine arrangements, one for the kitchen and one for the dining room. Now I'm going to go ahead and make one using some dried material. I have a heart-shaped basket, and I might want to use it for something else, so I don't want to glue anything into it. So what I'm doing is putting a piece of covered wire through a piece of dry foam. The foam comes in two ways, dry and wet. And I'm just going to put this through the basket and fasten it in. And using a dark color, I can trim it off and it kind of matches the look. I've also put a hanger up on top so that I can hang this up. I like to keep something on my door in the kitchen. And so I'm going to use some dried flowers. These are some that I've had around. Actually, they were longer at one point, and I've cut them off so that I can put them into this arrangement. I keep using them. And the idea here is to cover up the foam as much as possible. And I do have a few leaves that can add to that process. And a few things that have leaves, like this little purple flower that kind of accents it. And this leaf can go up and back. And we have a spot or two right in here. And we have available some little pins. These actually, when you cut it off the stem, there's nothing to really poke into the foam. So I'll use one of these little greening pins, or it's a little hairpin type pin. And will just stick right into the foam. And I have also a little hydrangea piece, and it too lost a stem. So we'll just put that in at this point. And this little guy probably could use one too. Again, it helps stick things into the foam area by going all the way in and come out. So we've arranged a few things in the little heart vase or heart basket. And then if I wish, I can put a nice bow up here. I've made the bow with some Valentine ribbon, and we need to stick it through the basket and fasten it in. There are our two pieces, and again, just twist them around. Again, all this will come off the basket or out of the basket if I decide I want to use it for something else down the line. And I can hang it up perhaps in the house or even on the front door for Valentine's Day. Another little thing I've put together for Valentine's Day, it's kind of a quick little project, is a little Valentine box to put some candy in for my grandkids or to put on the table as a table decoration. And they're very easy to make. I've done them, you can also put a gift card or something like that in them. And I'm going to put candy in them for Valentine's. And basically you start out, I printed this, I found it online. You can find them online if you look for a pillow box. This is called a pillow box. And I cut out around it, it's one piece of paper, and I used a cardstock, which is available at the office supply stores. And you cut it out, and then you use a dull knife. This happens to be a butter knife. And I scored it on all the lines. Then I used some glue, and I'm using rubber cement on this one. But you could also use a glue stick. And you glue it and let it dry. And it ends up like this. At this point, you fold in the two sides with the little tab side with the little hole in it, usually up. I think I messed up on that one. This one, yeah, I got to do it the other way. So you have a little opening. And you put your candy in there. And it makes a nice little small gift. Got with some little heart-shaped Reese's peanut butter cups, which seem to be a favorite with the young ones, and the old ones too. And then if I wanted to decorate it, which I did, I took half of a little paper doily, and a piece of Scotch tape, and then a little sticker, a little heart sticker. So there I have some little favors for Valentine's Day. We'll put those on our table later. You can find a lot of good things online if you just kind of look. And again, this is called a pillow box, and it's one of the easiest little boxes to make. Now I'm going to do some planting because it is time to plant a few things. So I'm going to plant a few seeds, and I'm going to make a little greenhouse to have them germinate in. And I'm going to start by poking holes in the bottom of this is a cider jug, but a milk jug or water jug works well. And I'm using an ice pick. You can also use a screwdriver or a sharp knife just to cut some holes in it so that it can drain. And I'll cut one hole about here so that I can use my scissors to open it up about a third of the way up. And you don't have to measure it, but you do want to leave about a ½ an inch for a hinge. And I usually do that around the handle area. And so that I have a little hinge that I can open it up. And then I will fill it with soil. I already have one made here with a smaller container. If you don't want to plant too many seeds, if you just want a few of something, a smaller one works just as well. I'm going to pat down the soil. And depending on the size of your seeds is how deep you want to plant your seeds. And today I'm going to plant some delphinium and a little bit of kale so that maybe we can have an early crop of kale. I only want about half a dozen so that I can set them out as plants and have them be early. Some of the rest of the seeds I'll plant in the garden itself. So I'm going to just space these out. Maybe a couple more. You don't want to plant them too close together or you end up with just a big jumble of seeds if you put too many in, especially in a small container. And then I'll put just a little bit of soil on top of these. Usually when you plant a seed, you want to cover it by a third or 3 times the size of the seed. So the seed's 1/3, and then you want 3 times as much cover over the top. Now that I have it in there, I'm going to use some of the duct tape. And fasten just one spot closed. You don't have to close the whole thing, because in about a month or two, when it's really warm and sunny, I'll want to open this up. And I would like to label it, and this will be labeled kale. And I also would like to put inside, which I should have done before I closed it, another label. And I'll put its whole name on it, and I should be able to open it and stick this in, and I usually stick it in around the hinge area. I label twice in case the one on the outside, because it's going to go out and sit in the sun, I want to make sure it doesn't get so faint I can't read it. Now the next one I'm going to do are delphinium. You can do broccoli. You can do most perennial plants at this point, and especially if your envelope says something like pre-chill seed for 2 to 4 weeks, because what you're doing when you plant them this way is you are pre-chilling them. And some of the native plants, butterfly weed, and all the milkweeds, they all need pre-chilling. They go to seed out in the yard and they'll reseed for you there. But if you're planting them in a pot, they won't germinate until they've been pre-chilled a little bit. So delphinium, these are tall delphinium, and I really would like to see some of them in my garden. Hopefully, if I get them in started, they will continue to reseed in the garden. And again, I'm going to just very lightly cover these. Sometimes the envelope will also tell you whether they need to have light to germinate, in which case you don't even cover the seed at all if it's very fine seed. So we'll label these too. And tape it shut. So it's really very simple to start some perennials. Now we're going to set them out in the garden. You may have noticed, if you had sharp eyes, when we were out there, there were some milk cartons out there already. And those have a few butterfly weeds in them and some milkweed. And I will basically forget about these. They will be rained on, they will be snowed on. Last year, they were covered in snow in March, and I just left them alone. And one of these days in late March or in April sometime, you go out and you look in, and my goodness, it's green. There's a lot of little green shoots. So it takes them a while to come up, but You want to know what is coming up because they all look like just little green shoots when they first come up. So that will help. And these are going to go outside right away today, sit in the garden, and I'll forget about them until it's time to transplant the seedlings. The next thing I'm going to do is an indoor project, and I need to go over and get some hot water. I'm making a birdseed wreath. And I'm going to make it in a ring mold, and I've softened 1 package of gelatin for this, and it's just the regular unsweetened, unflavored gelatin that you get in a little box. And to that I'm going to add some hot water. You soften it first in a 1/4 cup cold water. And then you need to dissolve it in hot water. So I'll stir this around until it all dissolves. This is going to make a wreath that I can hang outside. And to this I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of corn syrup. The internet is filled with recipes for these, and some of them vary a little bit, but this seems to be one of the most common formulas for making these outdoor wreaths. Actually, if you use Jell-O molds, you can make all kinds of fancy ones. You need to put a hole in the middle if you intend to hang it, so that you'll have a place to hang it. Although you can also put them in an old mesh onion bag. 3 tablespoons of cornstarch, and then 3/4 cup of flour, just regular white wheat flour. And we stir that up, and it's going to get kind of like a batter. Then I'm going to add birdseed, about 4 cups of birdseed, and stir that around. Until all the birdseed gets covered with the gelatin mixture. I saved this one to last because it's the messiest one. And I'm going to start adding it to the mold. And I'm actually going to put on my gloves for this because it gets quite messy. Now, evidently, some people have had a problem with the wreath falling apart when the birds eat through one portion of it, and it just falls apart. So they decided to put a ring in the middle, and I found these rings at the craft store. They were, I think, 2 for $1, not very expensive. And we're going to pack this in well, and I'll put the ring right in the middle of the wreath. And this hopefully will hold it together. I wouldn't recommend leaving it out in heavy rain. Snow would probably be okay, but I think a lot of heavy rain would probably break it up. But we just want to continue packing it in. And take these off. And to further pack it down, I'm going to put a piece of plastic wrap over it. I discovered this when I made another one. And just really pack it down well. And this needs to sit for 24 hours. I've refrigerated it for several days. And I did use some Pam cooking spray on the mold to help it come out of the mold later on. And here we have our finished wreath. And it comes out of the mold, and you have a circle, And now we're going to put a ribbon on it so that I can hang it up outside. This will be my hanger. And I'll make a little bow to go on it as well. Some people put cranberries or dried fruit in the pan before they add the birdseed mixture, and that can be nice too. And this can hang outside for the birds to enjoy until it's gone, and then I'll hang my other one. And hopefully by then it will be spring. Now let's go into the kitchen and see what we can cook up there. Okay, the first thing I'm going to make for our Valentine meal, I'm going to work on a few things, but I thought I'd do the baked goods first. And I'm going to make some wheat germ muffins, or biscuits, I'm sorry. And I'm using 3/4 of a cup of flour, 1/4 of a cup of wheat germ, and that's just, wheat germ is really nutritious, and so I like to have a little more nutritious thing. And then you have 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'll mix that in for dry ingredients. And then I'm using 2 tablespoons of shortening, and I'm going to cut that into the mixture with a fork. You could use a pastry blender if you have one, but I tend to like a fork. This is the typical or biscuit method where you cut shortening or butter or some fat into a dry mixture. And then I'm going to add about 6 tablespoons of milk. And then you work quickly from this point on to just mix in the milk. And at this point I will put it out onto a floured board. And I'm going to just carefully knead this, just a few strokes to bring everything well together. I'll roll it fairly thick and cut it with a little heart cutter. I have a variety of cookie cutters. If you've watched before, you know that I have quite a few. And since this is a dinner for 2, I'm just making a few. I've already preheated the oven to 450. And these will only take about 10 minutes to bake. But they can be made in advance and then reheated. And you'll notice I very carefully folded the dough in order to maintain some flakiness. Rather than just balling it all together, I tried to kind of fold it together. And we can probably get one more out. And the re-rolls are never as pretty as the originals, but they're still tasty. And then we'll put those into our 450-degree oven. And they'll bake for 9 or 10 minutes, and then they'll be finished. The next thing I want to work on are some cookies, and I've already done some previous work on these. What I did is I made a sugar cookie dough and tinted half of it pink. And this has been refrigerated. When I rolled out the pink dough, I added some sugar to it, and I will do that with a little more of it. But then I cut it in strips, and I used a ruler to cut them. I have a metal ruler here that I use for cooking because it's nice and washable. And I stacked the strips one next to the other and pushed them together and then rolled them a little bit. And I had sprinkled some sugar onto the pink ones before I cut them. And now I can just go through and cut out my cookies. You have to make sure they stay together. It's a little more involved, but they do turn out kind of cute. I did divide the scraps when I was finished so that I could use the pieces, or you can ball them together and have kind of tie-dye cookies. And you can also use other size cutters to make smaller ones in between so that you use as much of the dough as possible. And I even have some smaller ones, so make little ones too, just all different size striped cookies. And if the stripes aren't exactly up and down, that's all right too. Then I will keeping these together is always a problem. So it's easier to just remove the leftovers and bake them right on the paper that's on the sheet, the parchment paper. So that's what I did with my other batch. And I will do with these as well. As you can see, it's very hard to move them over. So I just remove the extra scrap. And then I can re-roll that later. And they'll bake right here. They tend to stay together better if you do it this way. And just remove the pieces around the edge. And you want to leave them about an inch or so apart. They don't spread too much. And this will then bake in a 350 oven, again for about 10 minutes. Now I have the dough that I divided from my last baking, and I can re-roll that if you don't want to make striped cookies. This is another option. And I'll use my bigger cutter and then cut a small one out of the middle. This is a lot faster, I might add. And then just alternate the white and the red. And these two will go back in the oven. Now we need to make the rest of our Valentine's dinner. And I'm going to first make some salad. And I've just used the mixed spring greens. And I'm going to make a pear, goat cheese, and raspberry salad. And I'm going to put a pear slice on each one, a few pear slices. And this pear is decidedly not as ripe as it should be. If you want to serve pears, buy them 4 or 5 days ahead of time and just let them sit out in order to ripen. But we'll put a few slices in, and I'll make them very thin since it is a little on the crisp side. Then I want to add a few raspberries. I bought the raspberries. These are it's Valentine's Day, so this is kind of a luxury item in the winter. They are not inexpensive, and you do need to remember to use them right away because they will spoil quite quickly. So they need to be used within a day of purchase at least. I washed them very gently before I put them in here. I'm also going to add some chopped pecans that have been toasted at 350 for about 5 minutes and then cut into pieces. And some crumbled goat cheese. Again, this is a special meal, not quite everyday fare. And then I'll make, to go with these, a raspberry vinaigrette salad dressing. And I've put a half cup of olive oil in my food processor, and I'm going to add a half cup of the raspberries, and then 3 tablespoons of white wine vinegar I did not have, so I'm using a rice vinegar, which is also quite mild. And 1 tablespoon of balsamic, and I'm using a white balsamic. Though a dark balsamic would probably give it a little more color. And then some honey to taste. And I'm going to start out with a tablespoon, which I think should be right. I don't want it too sweet. I'm going to blend this on high. And we have a very raspberry dressing, but it does have one problem, and that would be seeds, raspberry seeds. And I'd like a smoother dressing. So I'm going to pour it through a small sieve. And we'll have to stir that around a bit to get all the seeds out of it. We'll continue to let it pour through, and then we can serve it with our raspberry salad. Wipe up our spills a little, and there's a little more left in the container, which again can go through to make a smooth dressing. And the next thing I want to do is a fish dish, and I need to put out some flour, a couple tablespoons, and I'm going to season the flour with a little lemon pepper. And then I need to get my fish out of the refrigerator. I wanted to save that until last to keep it cold. And I've cut about a half a pound of cod, this is for 2 people, into pieces. And I'm starting my 1 tablespoon of butter and a tablespoon of olive oil in the fry pan. And I'm going to dredge the fish in the seasoning and flour mixture. And when our pan heats up, we'll add it to the pan, and we're going to cook this for about 4 minutes on each side. That should be enough to completely cook the fish. This will make 2 nice servings. We're just going to let that saute. Okay, fish is done when it's cooked to 145 degrees. And this smaller pieces are well done, the larger pieces about there. So it's nice to have the even pieces. And I'm going to be serving these on a bed of linguine, but we're going to make a sauce in the same pan. So I'm going to put my fish on top of the linguine that I've already cooked. This can be done a little ahead and then reheated in the microwave. And I'm going to proceed to make a sauce. For the fish. By adding a little more butter, about a tablespoon more, half a tablespoon. And then we're going to add 2 cloves of garlic. And cook that and scrape it down a little bit more. Pan's still pretty hot. And I'm going to add a little dry white wine, and it's going to be just about 2 tablespoons. We want to cook that down very well, which it's doing very nicely. And then I'm going to add half a cup of chicken broth and about 1.5 tablespoons of lemon juice and a half cup of heavy cream. 1/4 cup, I'm sorry. I'm making half a recipe, so because I'm only serving 2 people. And I'm going to bring that to a boil for a minute. And I've added part of the chicken broth to a teaspoon of cornstarch and mix that up. And this will be our thickening for the sauce. And once this is boiled a little bit, I can add that mixture to it, and we'll let that boil in order so that we don't have a real cornstarchy taste to our sauce. We want it to boil, come to a nice full boil. This is called chicken piccata, or fish piccata, cod piccata. Sorry, a chicken piccata is the traditional dish, but we're using fish instead today. And I'm going to pour this sauce right over my pieces of fish and my linguine. So that we get a little bit on each piece. And we're going to garnish this dish with the traditional capers. And I've got about 2 tablespoons of capers. And some lemon slices, because this does have a lemony undertone. And these are very thin sliced lemon slices. Again, we want this to be a bit of a special meal today. And parsley. And believe it or not, the parsley is from my garden. This is parsley that was picked in about the 1st of November and kept in a glass jar in my refrigerator, and it's still just as good as it was the day it was picked. So now let's take things into the dining room for our dinner. I'll see you there. And here is our Valentine's dinner for 2. We've got cod piccata. It's kind of a lemony, nice dish served on whole wheat linguine. Lovely salad of pears, raspberries, pecans, and goat cheese, and the raspberry vinaigrette that we made using the fresh raspberries. And these are the cookies that we also baked. And we have one more thing that I haven't gotten out of the oven yet, and that would be our little rolls, our wheat germ heart-shaped biscuits to go with the whole meal. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Liz Davey, and you've been watching A Walk in the Garden on NCTV, and happy Valentine's Day.